Craigslist is nowhere near what it used to be. It's been replaced by websites like Facebook Marketplace and Poshmark. Maybe a big reason for this stems from not just the rampant scams on the website, but also because it's the go-to site for a lot of creeps. So for old time's sake, here are 3 Craigslist ads with disturbing backstories. This was an ad posted in Kansas City a month ago that a viewer by the name of Christian sent in. It's a harmless looking ad for an old vacuum cleaner. This was posted in the for sale by owner section and listed as free. It was titled, "Free Dirt Devil Vision Bagless Canister." The ad description said, "I'm giving away this perfectly working Dirt Devil bagless vacuum cleaner. My wife and I got a new vacuum and no longer need this. First come, first serve. We'll disclose address after communication." The listing left a phone number to contact, and so Christian replied to the ad, sending a text saying he's interested, and promptly got a response. The reply back was, "Hello, what is your name?" To which he replied, "Christian, what's yours?" They replied, "Jackie, nice to meet you. The vacuum is all yours, when can you come pick her up?" Christian replied back, "If you can hold it for me until tomorrow, I'd come then." They replied back, "Okay." So the next day, the seller sends a follow-up text, "Hello Christian, what time can you pick up the vacuum?" 8 o'clock if that works for you. What's the address? They replied back, "Sounds good to me, give me a call, I'll explain how to get here." So at this point, Christian calls the number as directed and a man's voice answers the phone. Not the female voice he was expecting after the seller introduced themselves as Jackie. Christian asked if this were Jackie he was speaking with, and the man said no, that's his wife, and that she's not available right now. This was the first red flag for Christian, since it was the same number he was contacting the whole time, yet apparently both this man and his wife were using it, which would just seem a little unusual to anyone since no one really shares cell phones. The man on the phone introduced himself as Brock and explained how to get to the location. He gave Christian the cross streets to what he described as his warehouse, which he'd have to open the gate for. Christian had a pretty normal reaction, asking what he meant by warehouse, because he was expecting to be given a regular home address to pick up this relatively small item. Brock told Christian that he owned part of a small warehouse where he and his wife would store a lot of their old belongings and stuff they were going to sell. He claimed to be a wholesaler. Christian agreed to come to the specified location at 8 o'clock near Grandview, which is south of Kansas City. The specified cross streets led him to a quiet T intersection in an area with nothing but unmarked buildings that resembled warehouses. Christian parked his car and found the gate that he was told to meet Brock at. When he texted him that he was there, the gate started to roll open automatically, and beyond the gate was a long driveway between 2 different brick buildings leading into darkness. Christian called Brock, who rejected the call and texted Christian to come inside the gated area and inside the warehouse straight ahead. It was so dark ahead of him that he couldn't even see a warehouse. Christian asked Brock to bring the vacuum outside by the gate, and this is where the alleged Brock person stopped answering. After trying to call Brock's number multiple times, eventually the calls would go straight to voicemail, likely because Christian's number was blocked. So Christian hurried back to his car and rushed home. Upon checking on the ad once he got home, the listing was taken down. Doing a reverse phone lookup, he found that the number didn't come up on any phone book websites. By avoiding going beyond that gate and into the darkness and unknown ahead, he likely avoided something terrible. The following Craigslist ad was posted on May 24th of 2012. On the surface, it looks a little unusual, but like something you could expect to see on the casual encounters side of Craigslist. The poster of the ad said he was looking for a male who was interested in becoming an actor in a personal movie he was making. His requirements for the person included being between the age of 18 and 35 and good-looking, and including a face and body picture. He also stated he wasn't going to pay them anything, as the movie was strictly for his own pleasure. At the bottom, he states he's not looking for sex. The poster of this ad was Luca Rocco Magnotta, a notorious Canadian murderer who had a whole documentary made after him. The unfortunate soul who responded to this ad was 33-year-old Jun Lin. Luca spent a lot of time in mental hospitals growing up, and in 2002 he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He first attracted online attention when he started posting videos of cats. Not cute videos though. In 2010, a series of videos were posted online which showed Luca suffocating and drowning kittens. These were not his first crimes. He had already been convicted of fraud in 2004 after racking up $17,000 on a friend's credit card, and in 2005 he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman. The video spawned outrage over the internet, and an online community of people formed to work together to try to find the man behind the videos. A tip led them to Luca, and around this time, Luca posted another video in which he fed a cat to a snake and started hinting that his victims might shift to humans. Unfortunately, 33-year-old student Jun Lin was the one to have the misfortune of being Luca's first human victim. Jun was a lonely Concordia University student who didn't have many friends and had only been in Canada for a couple of years. Jun responded to Luca's ad, and they met that same night. Security footage captured them entering Luca's building, and that night, Jun sent a text to his ex that he would see in the morning, saying good morning. It would be his final text. The next day, Luca posted another video called One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. The video captured the savage murder of Jun Lin. In it, Luca stabbed Jun with an ice pick while he was tied up, before performing unspeakable acts and dismembering his body. A few days later, viewers of the video were attempting to report the crime to police, but the reports were dismissed by police because they believed the video was fake. By then, Luca had already started disposing of the body. CCTV footage captured him throwing bags into a bin while wearing Jun's t-shirt. On the 29th of May in Montreal, Mike Nadeau, who worked as a janitor, found a suitcase that had been sitting outside the apartment building he worked at for days. He ignored it until the suitcase started emitting a foul smell. Upon opening it, he found Jun's torso inside.
So the curiosity, I guess, got the best of us. We said, let's open this and see what's in there. So there was a small lock. We cut it. We opened up, and there was a torso with no head and just,
Lucas sent the rest of Jun's severed limbs to various different political parties and elementary schools. Eventually, police suspected that Luca had traveled to Europe, and this was confirmed when CCTV footage caught him in Germany. Authorities were able to arrest him in an internet cafe in Berlin on the 4th of June, where he was sitting reading articles about himself. In 2014, he was found guilty of first-degree murder, publishing obscene materials, committing an indignity on a body, and criminally harassing the Prime Minister, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Knowing all of this information makes this little Craigslist post that usually wouldn't bat much of an eye in the casual encounter section incredibly disturbing. This last one happened to a freshman girl in college who I'll refer to as Christina. Christina was strapped for cash and was looking to sell her prom dress and other dresses she no longer planned on using. So she made a listing on Craigslist with pictures of all the dresses, including 2 pictures of her wearing the prom dress. Christina left her number in the Craigslist ad to be contacted on, which for a young girl putting 2 pictures of her body on Craigslist of all websites wasn't a good idea. Not surprisingly, she got a phone call within the hour, and it was someone who claimed to take interest in the dresses. It was a man on the other end, who she says sounded anywhere from 35 to 55, with a slightly raspy voice. He said he was calling about the dresses she posted on Craigslist, to her surprise because she would obviously expect only females to call or text and inquire about the dresses. He explained that he was looking to buy the dresses for his girlfriend as a gift, and he wanted to know if they'd fit her, so Christina told him all the sizes and prices per dress. The man asked for more pictures of the dresses if possible, which she agreed to, so she kept him on the phone on speaker while she took more pictures of the dresses laid out on her bed. Mid doing this, he started asking more questions that progressively got weirder, starting with how tall she was, how the dress fits up there, and what size bra she wears, to which Christina started feeling uncomfortable, mentioning to him that's not relevant. He apologized and said he just wanted to make sure it would be a good fit for his girlfriend. He then proceeded to ask if the dresses were tight on Christina, and she replied some of them are moderately tight. The next question was where Christina really started to question this man's intentions. He asked if there was any chance she could send him pictures with her wearing all of the dresses to get a better idea of if they'd fit his girlfriend. After a few seconds of silence because Christina didn't know what to say, the man on the other end asked if she used to wear panties under the dresses, followed by a short creepy chuckle, and then he said, "You have a really cute voice." Christina hung up the phone and blocked the number. She also took the ad down from Craigslist and didn't plan on listing it again on there. But she would later find out that he would start stalking her after a random account started following her on Instagram and requested her on Facebook. Both accounts had no pictures and the name Mike Allen. A quick lookup of the number that called her revealed the name Michael Allen on Google. This meant she was now dealing with the stalker situation, and it only got worse from there. When she blocked both accounts, she kept getting calls from a no caller ID number, and it only stopped when she set up silence unknown callers on her phone. But the stalking didn't end there. One night later, there was a running car with its lights off parked outside Christina's house. She noticed this before going out. She called to her dad to point it out as possibly being the guy who had been stalking her, and as soon as her dad stepped outside, the car drove away with its headlights still off. At this point, Christina's dad sent a threatening text to the man's number, and then tried calling multiple times to no avail, to end up leaving a loud voicemail. It seemed to do the trick, as the stalking stopped as far as they know, and hopefully that's the case for good. Christina was smart in how she handled this, hanging up and blocking the number as soon as the man made creepy comments, and blocking his social media accounts. Unfortunately, there's not much to do once someone has your number if they want to stalk you, as a lot of your information can be found just through that. That's why it's best that if by some chance you still use Craigslist, don't use your real phone number. I'm a single mother of my 8-year-old boy Mark. When this happened, he was 5 and I was 27. I have my own house that was passed down to me from my grandparents. It's in the quiet side of town with a lot of older people, and I still live here with Mark today. It was Christmas time, and I was out with Mark shopping. I was doing my Christmas shopping for my family. Mark and I went to the mall, including a few clothing stores and a hardware store where I bought a gift for my dad. After all the shopping was done, I took Mark to McDonald's to get him some burgers and ice cream. Afterwards, we left the mall through the south exit, and here we bumped into a mall Santa standing outside. He waved at us and said the usual Santa stuff. He then knelt down to get to Mark's level and asked him what he wanted for Christmas. Mark led my hand closer to the Santa, and I allowed it because he seemed like a normal, nice mall Santa. Mark said he wanted a Nintendo Switch, which ironically was what I was planning on buying him for Christmas. The Santa laughed and said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get it," while looking up at me and winking. I smiled, and then he stood up and started complimenting me, saying to Mark, "Your mother's a looker, Mark, you know that?" And Mark laughed, even though he didn't know what that meant. I still smiled. Then we had a couple minutes worth of seemingly friendly adult conversation about the holiday mayhem and such. The guy said he worked for the mall. I regrettably mentioned the stress of being a single mom during Christmas is unfathomable. And then I made a joke about needing Santa's help. Then the Santa made what I thought was an innocent joke, saying, "Mark, have you ever heard the song, 'I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus'?" And Mark shook his head yes. Then he leaned in towards me with his cheek, implying he wanted me to kiss his cheek. I was going to give him an innocent little peck on the fake beard, but as I leaned in, he turned his head and tried doing that old trick where he kisses you on the lips instead. I moved my face away in time. The way he did it was so creepy and aggressive, too. He looked at me and started doing the Santa kind of laugh, but there was nothing jolly about it. I said, "Come on, Mark," and we started walking away. He yelled "Merry Christmas," and that was the last thing I heard him say. As we drove away past the back exit of the mall, I noticed he wasn't there in front of the entrance anymore. I wish I took that into consideration as to what may have happened next. We got home, and after bringing everything inside, I locked the door, and Mark and I started to watch a Christmas movie. Our wholesome time together was then interrupted. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late for any kind of door-to-door people. I told Mark to keep watching as I went to go answer the door. I said, "Who is it?" through the door, and a man's voice on the other side said, "It's Santa." My heart dropped. I said, "If you're the mall Santa, please go away, or I'm calling the cops." He replied, "You dropped something out of your bag, miss. I'm just looking to return it." I replied, "What did I drop?" He replied, "I don't know, miss. I'm not looking to be nosy, but if you open the door, I can hand it to you." I repeated myself that I wanted him to leave now. I then decided to call the mall management office of the mall to report this, but the man on the phone said they don't officially hire any mall Santas at this mall, and that whoever's dressing as Santa is doing it on their own accord. With that bit of information, I felt incredibly unsafe. I went back to be with Mark, but my mind was elsewhere now. I felt this sickly, worried feeling in my gut. I made an excuse to get up again after a few minutes. I went to the kitchen out of earshot of the TV. I raised the blinds to the kitchen window. I couldn't see anything out there, being that the kitchen light was on and it was pitch black outside. But I heard a man yelling, "Ho, ho, ho." He was probably out there watching me at that very moment, looking out the window. I had no choice but to call the police and report that I was followed by a man dressed as Santa. I told Mark to keep watching the movie, and I spoke to the police outside. They took a report and were on their way. The police having come made me feel just a little better. A few nights later, though, my doorbell rang again, around the same time, if not a little later. Mark was already asleep tonight. I was in the living room watching a show. I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my room, which is connected to Mark's room. The doorbell didn't ring again, but I never went back downstairs that night. It wasn't until the next day when I was leaving the house that I found the note taped to my front door. It was typed out and printed. This is a picture of the note, and it said, "I'll just be blunt. I'm sure you can guess who this is. I didn't mean to scare you the other night. I just had a long shift, and when a pretty lady talks to you after pretending to be Santa for 6 hours, hormones kind of go crazy. You and your son are the cutest things ever, and I'd love to one day be a part of your family. You can't pretend you didn't feel the connection when we spoke the other night. I already know where you live, now I just need your number. Feel free to shoot me a text whenever, and maybe we can plan something one day." Sorry, I know this may seem creepy or a bit much, but I'm the kind of guy where if I see something I like, I go after it. Anyway, happy holidays if we don't speak soon. Here's my number. Best, Ted. I wanted to crumple this up, but I took a picture of it, called the police again, and gave this to them. Since it had his number on it, the police could work with that. They said I'd be hearing from someone when action was taken, and that following Monday, I got a call from, I assume, a detective telling me that the man would not be contacting me anymore, and if he did, to let him know. I never heard from that creep again. I assume the police threatened to arrest him if there was any further contact. This is a short but scarring story nonetheless from my early childhood. I grew up in an average middle-class home in the suburbs. My sister and I were huge fans of Christmas as kids. I had to be like 6 years old when this happened, because we had just moved to our new house. This is one of my earliest memories in life that I remember vividly just because of the gravity of it. On Christmas Eve, I would always have trouble sleeping, even as a young kid, just due to anticipation. I would stay up really late playing video games in my room on my old box TV. I'd play until I just fell asleep from exhaustion. This night in question, I was playing a Star Wars game for the PS1, and when I had to go to the bathroom, I turned the volume down low and quietly snuck out of my room, because I knew my mom would get mad if she heard me sneaking around on Christmas Eve night. I snuck to the upstairs bathroom, and when I was done, I was quietly going back to my room, when I heard the sound of the tree rustling around downstairs. My first instinct was to think, Santa. I started tiptoeing down the stairs until I got to the bottom. The sound of the rustling pine needles was louder now. I peeked around the bottom wall of the stairway into the living room. There were no lights on, except for someone holding a flashlight. I could see only the person's legs as they were bent over behind the tree. There was a black bag on the floor, and this random adult man came out from behind the tree and looked at me. He looked at me and put his pointer finger up to his mouth, and he made a shushing motion with his lips. He whispered, "Yes, I'm Santa." I was old enough and smart enough to know that wasn't what the Santa I grew up knowing looked like. I started screaming for my mom and dad as loud as I could. I remember the man started freaking out, deciding whether or not to take the bag he filled with our gifts, and he ended up running away to the front door. I don't remember if he had to unlock it or if it was already unlocked or not. I just remember him leaving through the front door, and seconds later my parents running down the stairs. I'm sure I screamed there was a man in here, and them seeing the black bag on the floor filled with our would-have-been stolen gifts proved that. Here's where my memories started getting fuzzy. so I had to ask my parents what happened next. But my dad told me he went outside in his slippers and ran all over the place ready to kill someone. Half the ornaments on the tree were taken off and in the bag. What kind of sick, evil person steals people's sentimental Christmas ornaments? According to my dad, the method in which the man broke in was the back door, which it appeared he yanked open with a crowbar due to the chipped wood. A house a few blocks away had also fallen victim to this, and it was on the news. It was most definitely the same guy. I don't remember much from when I was 6, but this is a memory that most of it still sticks in my brain like it was only a few years ago. It was December 2020. My fiancée and I bought a house together a few years ago. It's a cute house in a decent neighborhood, a nice area to raise a family. That's why what happened 2 years ago was all the more shocking and disgusting. We know all of our neighbors, both our next door neighbors and the 3 closest neighbors across the street. Everyone is friendly enough, but you truly never know the skeletons hidden in someone's closet. Our neighbor Paul to the right always seemed nice the few times we'd speak, but he never really spoke too much. I'd see him outside almost every day, either coming or leaving for, I'm assuming, work, though I never knew what he did for a living. At this time, I hadn't seen the guy in a few days, and his car hadn't moved from his driveway. Obviously, that in of itself isn't any cause for alarm. All of the neighbors, including Paul, had their lights up already. I found it interesting how Paul, a single man in his 40s, would put lights up. I actually found it kind of nice. I was late to the party putting my Christmas lights and decorations up outside one night. While doing so, I noticed Paul's Christmas lights out of nowhere started flickering like crazy. All of them, not just one strip of lights. It looked like it could have just been faulty wiring or some electrical glitch. The next day, I left for work around 10 and noticed again Paul's car was still in the driveway. I also noticed all the blinds in his house were still closed. Even when I got back from work, the blinds were all closed, but his Christmas lights were on, so he was definitely home. I joked with my fiancée that he must have been on some kind of hibernation. Later that night, my fiancée came inside and told me of Paul's Christmas lights acting up. I went outside and it was the exact same thing that was happening the night before. The flickering wasn't happening in a way that would appear that he programmed it that way. It was happening in a very spastic, glitchy sort of way. So I figured I'd be nice and go let him know, and also see if he's okay since I hadn't seen him. I knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, I rang. All the blinds were closed and I couldn't tell if the lights were on or not. When there was no answer, I rang one more time. Finally, the door opened and Paul greeted me. I let him know about his flickering lights, which I just noticed weren't flickering anymore. I promised him I wasn't making it up. He said he wasn't aware of that and thanked me. I asked if he was alright, as I hadn't seen him in a while. He said he was just feeling under the weather. He was acting a bit off. Then I heard something from inside the house. At first I thought I was imagining it, but it sounded like a child screaming for help. Paul didn't have any kids. I was about to ask him, "Did you hear that?" But on the spot I decided not to. I said goodbye and walked back to my house. Then I told my fiancée to call the police right now. I think Paul has a child in his house. Her reaction was literally, "What did you say?" I said, "I think Paul kidnapped a child." So I called the police and said I think I heard a child screaming inside my neighbor's house. My neighbor who doesn't have kids and hasn't been leaving his house the past week or two. I asked to keep who made the call anonymous, though I knew Paul wouldn't be so stupid as to not know it was me who made the call. Sure enough, the police arrived and entered his house on exigency, and when I heard what they found, I was appalled. There was a young boy locked in the basement. He had been locked down there for 4 days. The boy had been kidnapped from a completely different town. As far as the flickering lights, the boy was a genius and somehow found a way from the basement to flicker the Christmas lights as an attempt to call for help and get someone's attention outside, probably whenever he saw someone through one of the blocked-off basement windows. I reckon he saw his chance to call for help when someone, me, was at the front door. Clearly a very smart kid with great survival instincts. I'm glad he was reunited with his family. I don't want to know what was done to him, but I hope he lives a normal life and has put this behind him. Knowing how serious of a crime child kidnapping is, Paul won't be getting out of prison anytime soon. I was home alone one weekend. so my girlfriend Jenny came over to spend the weekend with me. It was the middle of December, and Christmas festivities were in full swing. Jenny wanted to watch Christmas movies tonight, so we ordered food, drank wine, and sat by the Christmas tree in the living room watching Christmas movies. We started with the Polar Express, then we started watching Elf. We ran out of wine, so I decided I'd run to the liquor store down the block to get more. It would only take 10 minutes anyway. It was a Saturday night, so they were open later. The usual cashier was working, and I got stuck in a conversation with him like I always do whenever I go there. Mid-conversation with him, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I checked my phone to see it was Jenny. I interrupted the cashier, saying 1 sec, and I picked up. Jenny sounded scared, saying she keeps hearing noises from below the living room. That would mean the crawl space. I told her it's fine, there's nothing down there. She asked me to stay on the phone with her until I got back, so I did. I walked a 5-minute walk back home, and Jenny was still on the couch. She had the movie paused still, saying that she was listening for sounds. When I asked her if she heard any other sounds, she said no. She asked what if there's an animal down there. I told her that's not possible, as there's no openings from anywhere outside. I opened the wine bottle, and we continued to watch the movie. It wasn't long after that we both heard a distinct thud type of sound from below us, from the crawl space. I looked at Jenny and she looked at me. She was right, there was something down there. I said, oh shit, there might actually be an animal down there. Once again, we paused the movie and I went to the closet with the attic door inside. I grabbed the flashlight on the ledge and went down into the crawl space. I stayed by the crawl space door and just did a quick scan of the place. There are a million boxes down there, so a small animal could have been hiding anywhere. It smelled like piss in there, which pretty much confirmed that there was something down there. I'm not an exterminator or pest control, so there was nothing I could do about it. I told my parents about it in the family group chat and told my dad he'd have to call pest control tomorrow. Then, as I was climbing back up the stairs, I heard something from across the crawl space. I don't know what it was, but something moved. I got scared that some animal was going to run at me, so I hurried up the stairs and shut the door. There wasn't much else we could do now except just go back to the living room and finish watching the movie. After Elf ended, we went to my room and eventually went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night having to pee really badly and with a throbbing headache. I got up and opened my bedroom door and looked down into the dark hallway. At the end of the hallway, I saw a person's silhouette. I almost screamed, but instead I closed the door quietly and locked it. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and then the doorknob turned, and someone tried opening the door. And then a deep, hoarse-sounding voice on the other side said, "Hello?" That was when Jenny started to scream. She had been woken up by my getting up, and she heard the voice too. I would have tried to calm her down, but I was scared shitless myself. I did hear footsteps walk away from the door, and so I called 911. Waiting for the cops felt like a millennium. All I know is when the cops got here, there was no one else in this house. Whoever it was left. The smell of piss in the crawl space wasn't my imagination. There was literally a puddle of that person's piss on the ground, which is pretty disturbing because that would suggest that he had been down there for a while. While it was likely a homeless squatter, that didn't make it any less horrifying. My family didn't even believe it at first. I've never forgotten to lock the door ever again. These are 3 honeymoon stories. Oftentimes, newlyweds take their honeymoons in foreign countries where the locals may not always speak their native tongue. In one of these stories, that exact scenario proved to be a problem, as a matter of fact. Learning a second or third language can prove to be a very useful skill that will come in handy many times in your life, and the app Babbel has now made learning a new language easier and more fun. All you need is 10 to 15 minutes a day, and within 3 weeks, you'll be quickly picking up a new language. Unlike other language apps and websites that may teach you robotic phrases that not even natives may use, Babbel thrives on preparing you for conversational language that you will be able to use in the real world. Also be sure to check out Babbel Live, where you can also take online classes in real time for a more personal approach. Right now, if you buy 6 months, Babbel is offering you an additional 6 months for free. Check the link in the description. For my wife and I's honeymoon, we went to Hawaii. Our hotel was on Maui, which we heard was the best island for couples and honeymoons. The hotel was on the beach, and every night they'd have torch shows, luau's, and other kinds of live entertainment. During the first few days, we did a lot of drinking and restaurant hopping. On our fourth day, we wanted to explore one of the jungle hiking trails, as there are a bunch on the island, and it was on our bucket list for the trip. We drove our rental car a long drive to the nearest parking lot to PPY Trail, a long scenic trail in the bamboo forest in the jungle. The trail would eventually lead to numerous waterfalls and hidden ponds that you could swim in. We were told about it by some locals and other tourists, so that's what we wanted to do. There were a few cars in the parking lot, but the parking lot wasn't just for this one trail. Walking down the path for a while, it truly was just a wall of bamboo on either side of us. It was truly an environment I'd never seen before. My wife stopped us and pointed at a small animal slightly off the trail. It was a mongoose. It was stopped, looking at us, and we both thought it was adorable. My wife started approaching it slowly, bent down to appear smaller and less intimidating. I did the same. Of course, the little creature ran away pretty swiftly, and my wife chased after it goofily. I followed suit. As we got deeper into the jungle, straying away from the trail, we heard the sound of water. It was a waterfall nearby. We followed the sound of it until we came to this beautiful pond with a small waterfall pouring into it. We dipped our feet in the water, and it was a surprisingly comfortable temperature, and it was deep enough to submerge ourselves in. So we decided to do a little skinny dipping, knowing how unlikely it would be that anyone else would be here. Well, apparently we were wrong about that, because as we were in the water, my wife shrieked and said, "Oh my God," as she pointed at some older man in a straw hat with a long gray beard standing in the jungle half behind a tree, staring at us. I'm too nice of a person, so I waved for some dumb reason, instead of yelling to stop creeping on us, because that's what it looked like he was doing. He didn't wave back, he didn't smile, he didn't even move. I looked at my wife and said we should leave, but she didn't want to step out of the water naked for him to see. I kind of agreed. So now I called out to him, asking if he needed something, and only then he called back in a surprisingly deep voice, saying he's looking for his dog. I said we haven't seen it, and then he walked away. I said to my wife we need to go immediately. We got out of the water and got dressed, then tried to find the trail. But we couldn't find it. We strayed far enough away from it that we were apparently lost. We had lost the direction we came from, and there was no cell reception out here. It was getting late in the day, and panic was setting in. By the time the sun was setting, my wife was in tears. All the while, as it got darker and darker, we felt as though we were being followed, hearing footsteps every now and then. It reached the point where the jungle was completely dark now, and we had to use our flashlights on our dying phones. But when we heard footsteps coming from behind us again, I whispered to my wife to turn it off to not reveal ourselves. We felt like we were being followed for hours. After turning out the lights, it was pitch black for a second, until my eyes started adjusting to the darkness. As soon as that happened, I noticed the figure about 10 feet away, and it was slowly creeping closer. I backed away slowly as I pushed my wife behind me. I said, "What do you want?" in a very nervous voice. My wife apparently didn't see him, because she turned her phone's flashlight back on and aimed it at the figure, revealing it to be that old man with a straw hat and beard holding a hacksaw. We both screamed. My wife let out a scream of fear while I screamed, "Go, go, go," to her. We ran through the jungle without any lights. There was just enough light to barely see where we were going. We ran and ran and ran, thankfully wearing sneakers and hiking attire. Eventually I got cell reception, so we followed the map back to the parking lot we came from, which took a good 10 to 15 minutes of running. We made it back to the car, and at that point, it felt like we were given a new chance at life. The next day we went straight to the Maui Police Department and reported the whole incident in an attempt to warn other tourists who may be visiting that specific trail. After that, we tried the best we could to continue our honeymoon, but it definitely put a damper on things. My honeymoon was in Sicily. Our hotels were in Palermo, Cefalu, and Messina in that order. While in Messina, we did most of the sightseeing at sites like Taormina. Messina was packed with beautiful old architecture and museums to explore, which is what my wife Patricia and I enjoy the most. Messina is a port-heavy city, and like the rest of Sicily, there are a lot of English-speaking tourists, but also a lot of Italian-speaking locals. We don't really speak any Italian beyond maybe an elementary level. We'd have a lot of locals approaching us trying to sell us things. At night, the vibe where we were was fun. Lots of music, people drinking and dancing and whatnot. We were partaking a little bit, while also continuing to walk around and explore. The night got the better of us, and we ended up getting pretty drunk, and the time flew by. Pretty soon it was past midnight, and things outside on the streets were simmering down. We took a wrong turn back to our hotel, and kind of lost our way. Eventually we ended up in this sketchy alleyway, and Patricia was getting upset that we seemed to be entering a sketchy area. I put my arm around her to make her feel safer. Suddenly some guy came up to us obnoxiously close, speaking Italian like a machine gun, so quick we couldn't even attempt to understand any words. We couldn't tell if he was angry or concerned, but he seemed frantic. He kept saying this word phantasma. At that moment, I didn't know what that word meant. I pushed the guy out of our faces and walked Patricia and I quickly out of the alleyway. He yelled more stuff at us in Italian. I didn't understand a single word of it. As we got away from him, I googled what the word phantasma meant, because it was the only word that he kept repeating that stood out. It means ghost, and when we found that out, we looked at each other. I couldn't help but nervously laugh to try to get Patricia to laugh as well, simply because it sounded ridiculous. We were in this dark, sketchy area of the city for sure. There didn't seem to be anyone else around. We'd normally call an Uber, but it's not even a thing in Sicily, so we had to walk it. I have to admit, I was probably as uncomfortable as Patricia, as we'd heard certain parts of the city were unsafe at night. There was this quiet woman's crying sound coming from behind us all of a sudden. We both heard it, and we both looked back. There was this young but freakishly tall woman about 10 yards away from us, walking slowly in our direction. Her face was buried in her hands. Her height was actually unnaturally tall. She looked taller than me. In fact, it was so creepy that even Patricia, who's usually a sweet, nurturing person, whispered that we should get the hell away from her. We jogged down this narrow street and turned left to another alleyway. And we turned back again to the crying sounds. That woman was now at the end of this alleyway, just behind us, but still walking at the same slow speed, her face still buried in her hands. It felt like we were in this channel of alleyways and narrow one-way streets, and every time we turned, we'd still hear the crying behind us. It only stopped when we made it back to, I guess, what you'd call one of the main roads with other civilian traffic besides us. From there, we simply walked back to the hotel. Patricia kept insisting what we saw was a ghost, and every time she said it, it gave me chills. This story doesn't do it any justice in explaining just how disturbing seeing that tall, lanky woman walking towards us in that alleyway was. Not to mention that guy say the word ghost in Italian over and over. I'm not ruling it out as some kind of crazy over-the-top joke. For all I know, we ended up on some Italian YouTube prank channel. But Patricia insists on believing it was actually a ghost we saw, and it still gives me chills thinking about that possibility. We aren't the richest couple out there. We both work 9-to-5 jobs to make ends meet. We're doing all right now, but back when we got married, we were struggling. So when it came time for our honeymoon, we couldn't go all out and blast all our money. My wife, who I'll choose to keep nameless, was doing research for affordable beach getaways, and she found a private house in the Bahamas for 3 nights on Airbnb, so we went with that. After flight tickets and the cost for the rental, it didn't even come out to that much. Upon arrival, we entered the code for the padlock on the door to let ourselves into the home. It had a spacious living room and kitchen, a large bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a big back deck that led to the private beach. We spent all of the first day on the beach, then walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner. When we got back, this is where the weird things started happening. As soon as we walked in the door, we noticed things seemed like they were in the wrong places, like our sandals, our bags, and so on. Nothing was missing though, so we accused each other of having moved the stuff beforehand. We jumped in the hot tub that was on the back deck for a while, until we both heard something from inside the house, like a bang or a door closing. I got out from the hot tub to check, tripping all over the floor of the house. All the doors were closed though. I didn't remember if they were open earlier or not. Regardless, I checked the room and it was clear of any intruders, as well as the bathroom. I went back outside to grab a towel and put my clothes on. I was done in the hot tub anyway, and so was my wife, though I was growing a little suspicious, or cautious you might say. The second day we sat on the beach for a while again, then went to some of the touristy areas of the Bahamas and did dinner. When we got back, again, we felt like things were different. Our stuff seemed to be in the same spots, but the bathroom and bedroom doors were open, and we didn't remember keeping them open. We knew it was possible we were being paranoid now and didn't actually remember how the doors were left, but still it was getting uncomfortable now. We made sure all the windows and doors were locked, and we skipped the hot tub that night. We just watched movies on the TV in the living room, as there was a bunch of included streaming services on there. There was no upstairs to the house, yet we thought we could hear little taps and whatnot above our heads. Maybe the roof? Maybe an iguana or some similar creature? At this point, we were even starting to think there might be some kind of Bahamian creepy crawly in the house. It seemed like a more logical explanation as to there being an intruder in this relatively small space. That night, I was in bed before my wife. She was in the shower when I heard her scream. I basically exploded out of bed to run into the bathroom. She turned the water off by then and told me that there was something in the vent above the shower. I got on the ledge of the tub and looked in it, but it was too dark in there. However, I did hear some tiny noises coming from in there. This almost confirmed that there was a rodent or some small creature in the vents of the house. Still, we had one more day, it wasn't our problem. We went to bed together. The next thing I remember was waking up to my wife shaking me. She had this horrified look on her face that immediately sent shivers down my spine. She told me to listen, and the silence of the room allowed me to hear it. This frantic whispering sound coming from the ceiling, particularly one of the ceiling vents. That was it. I grabbed my phone to call the owner of the Airbnb. I heard the ringing, but simultaneously I heard this vibrating sound from above us. Immediately I started to think, wait, is there an upstairs that the owner is living in? The vibrating above us stopped almost as quickly as it started, but the call was still ringing on my end. Curiously, I took my phone's flashlight and aimed it up through the vents, and for just a split second, I saw someone looking down through the vent into the room. Most notably, I saw their eyes. We packed all of our important stuff as quickly as we could. It took all of about 30 seconds and we were out the front door. We ran through the sandy dirt road until we came to a street, then we stopped to catch our breaths. We stayed in a cheap hotel that night and the next night as well. The last day we spent most of it waiting at the airport, but we reported this incident to Airbnb and we got all of our money back, and I'm pretty sure Airbnb banned the owner of that house's account. We didn't pursue anything further with legal action, as we were just happy to get our money back. Nothing of ours was missing, but who the hell knows what kind of shady shit he was doing there when we weren't in the house. When I was a kid, my parents would sometimes bring me down to my aunt and uncle's place to stay for the weekend. Mainly, I'd spend time playing with my two cousins who were around the same age as me. They lived on a small farm with plenty of open space, and we could run around doing pretty much whatever we wanted. If we thought we could get away with it, the three of us would sometimes cross over to the neighboring farm about half a mile away. It had been abandoned for decades, with a scattering of derelict buildings and other structures still standing on the property, just begging to be explored. This was of course a gold mine for three adventurous young boys such as ourselves, especially after my cousins told me stories about the deaths that took place in the house. It was pretty classic fare. Man goes crazy, axe murders his entire family, hangs himself, returns every night as an angry spirit looking for new victims. Good, grisly stuff. Even at that age, I knew they were probably making it up, or at least embellishing old rumors. But seeing as how the setting lent itself so well to such tales, I allowed myself to buy into it. One afternoon, we decided to play hide and seek. When it was my turn to hide, I ran off for a flimsy brown barn that had living quarters on top, and climbed the stairs looking for a good spot. There was still furniture inside, and personal belongings lay scattered across the floor. I maneuvered over broken dishes, tattered clothes, and crumbling books, eventually coming to a small room with a closet. Jackpot. There were even long black dresses still hanging on the rod that I could hide behind. I stepped inside and managed to force shut the folding door. My only illumination was a slit of sunlight that shone through the crack in the door from a nearby window. I crouched down with knees tucked into chest and waited. Some time passed and there was still no sign of my seekers. I waited some more, debating if and when I should give myself up. After nearly an hour, this was starting to get boring. My head drooped. I woke with a jerk. It was pitch black. Drowsy and confused, I forgot for a minute where I was or what I had been doing. As it came back to me, the realization that it was now nighttime and that I had been abandoned here filled me with sinking dread in the pit of my stomach. I tried to get up, but a sudden cramp in my calf kept me grounded. I squirmed about, waiting for it to pass, when I heard a door slamming shut downstairs, and instantly froze. One of my cousins? There was a brief period of silence, then footsteps at the bottom of the stairs. But not just footsteps, a thud too. After every other step. These weren't the footfalls of a child. They were slow, heavy, deliberate. I held my breath, praying they would go away. They did not. The noises continued to ascend. After another moment of silence, the walking resumed, this time along with a steady scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floorboards. The footsteps made their way through the debris and wandered aimlessly through the various rooms. I thought I could smell something faintly putrid. The constant scrape sent cold shivers coursing down my arms and back. My worst fears were realized when the steps reached the bedroom doorway. They got closer and closer and finally stopped directly in front of the closet door. I couldn't see a thing. After an agonizing pause, they continued on over to the other side of the room and out the doorway again. They faded away down the hallway. I waited for what seemed like an eternity. There were no more sounds now, and I was trying to build up enough courage to open the door and flee. 3 things happened simultaneously just then. I was bombarded with a smell I can only describe as fresh roadkill. I heard raspy breathing behind me in the dark closet, and I felt hot breath against the nape of my neck. That was enough for me to hurtle myself out from the confines of that nightmare space, relying on memory and scant moonlight to navigate through the darkened house. All the while, I heard footsteps chasing behind me, closing in with terrifying speed. It was a clumsy, torturous escape full of trips and bumps and blind stumbling. I never looked back, at least not until I had burst out the front door and into the country night. And when I did turn around, I saw absolutely nothing. There were no more footsteps and nobody was chasing me. That didn't stop me from running though, all the way back to my aunt and uncle's house. There was a police car in the driveway when I got back. My parents were there too, worried sick. Everybody demanded to know where I had been. Apparently, when my cousins still hadn't found me by evening, they'd returned home to tell their parents. Eventually, the police were called in and informed me that they had already scoured every building on the farm. The insinuation that I was lying about my whereabouts didn't go unnoticed. None of it made any sense. It wasn't until years later that one of my cousins filled in a final piece of the story. He and his brothers had spent hours searching for me like they said, but the part they didn't tell anyone was that they thought they spotted me in the window of the bedroom I was hiding in. And when they got closer, they saw that it wasn't me. A young boy neither of them recognized was smiling and waving down at them and gesturing for them to come upstairs. That's when they ran back home. All of this while I slept in the closet. A few months ago, I was over at my friend's house down the block. In fact, that's where most of my friends on the block actually are. I'm 16 years old right now, the second oldest out of the group of kids down the block. There's Alan, who's 17, Dan, who's in the same grade as me but a little younger, Johnny, who's 14, Daniela, who's also 14, Nick, who's 13, and Tom, who's only 12 years old. There's a big age gap between some of us. but we're really the only kids on the entire block. Me and Dan were the closest friends, and we kind of just met all the other kids who lived around the area while we hung out originally. It started to become our Friday night tradition to play a big game of Manhunt by Daniela and Nick's house. We don't live in a typical suburban neighborhood. Our area is a lot more spacious and overall has a lot less people and houses. And for that reason, there wasn't a lot going on in our area, but it also made the game that much more fun. It was our turn to hide first. I had 3 other kids on my team, but more notably, I had Dan on my team. Me and Dan both went next door to Mr. Nelson's old house. He was an old man who passed away a few years ago, and since then no one has bought the house, leaving it vacant and a perfect property to add space for our game. Me and Dan went to the back section of the property by the lake, where we found a perfect hiding spot in some of his bushes. Dan, however, wanted to try something crazy and entered the vacant house through a sliding window, so I waited alone in the bushes. The goal of the game was to get back to Nick's house, which was always considered home base. A big part of the game is waiting. I was in those bushes for like 5 minutes, until I finally saw 2 kids from the other team entering the backyard looking for us. They were making a lot of noise, making their presence known. Once they left, the 2 of them continued even further down the block, giving us the perfect chance to run. I looked around at all the windows of the house, hoping Dan would be standing near one of them for me to wave him on. And when I looked up to one of the upstairs windows, I was relieved to see his head looking down to me. I waved him on, letting him know it's time to go, but he didn't move. Now I wasn't sure if he could see me. I went over to the window that he entered through, opened it, entered the house, and yelled up into the house calling Dan's name. I'm not even exaggerating when I say I felt like my heart stopped when I heard Dan's voice only a few feet away from me saying, "Dude, shh." I asked him how he got downstairs so quickly, and he just looked confused. He then told me he was sitting down here this whole time. At that same moment, we both looked up to the ceiling as there was a creaking sound coming from upstairs. We both hopped back out the window and ran back to Nick's house, where we called the game off. We went to ask Dan's dad if somebody had moved into the home, but he was positive that nobody had lived there for 3 years. Me, Alan, Dan, and Dan's dad all went over to the house, where we entered the same way we had earlier. Dan's dad was familiar with the house, as he used to be good friends with Mr. Nelson. He led the way upstairs into the bathroom with a window I had seen someone standing at. He flicked on the lights, and besides a crumpled up reddish-brown blanket on the floor, the room was empty. We went through the entire house and found nothing. Dan's dad really didn't know what to do from there, so he just said if any of us, including him, ever see anything or anyone in that house, we would report it to the police immediately. It's been a few months already and we haven't seen anything since, but I know that somebody, besides Dan, was in that house that night. Back when I was 17, my friend told me about this deep web drug website called Dream Market. It was where he bought things like weed and Adderall. He had what he referred to as a trusted dealer, whose information he sent me to buy from. I don't condone doing anything like this. I was simply just young and stupid. I thought buying Adderall would help me with my senior projects. Anyway, I went about doing that. However, this purchase made me intrigued to continue browsing Dream Market and seeing what else one could buy. And I saw this range from counterfeit bills to real guns. This got me more intrigued to view more of the deep web. I found some link somewhere on Dream Market that led to, I guess, what was a drug chat room, because it was just a lot of people seemingly advertising the drugs they were selling and their rates. I found it interesting. Some people would post random .onion links, and I clicked on one. It brought me to a black page with the title Home Base at top in large text. Underneath were a bunch of other random links. I clicked on a bunch of them. Most never loaded, probably being dead links. A couple loaded. One was another chat room. This one didn't have a title. There were like 3 usernames signed into the room, all random looking, just like the assortment of random letters I inputted just because I didn't care. The chat's previous history showed. A few people were talking in another language. Then another guy was typing in English. That guy was still in the chat room, and actually, before I typed anything, he typed yo directed at me. I typed yo back. He said, "What you looking for?" I typed back, "I don't know, LOL." He asked how I found that link, and I told him just from some site called Home Base. I asked if he had any cool links, as it was my first time on the deep web. He types back LOL, then sent a link. He didn't say anything else. I clicked the link, and it took a little while to load the page. It loaded the black background first, then a little text box near the bottom, and the last thing that loaded was a video. At first I thought it was like a pausable video, but it looked to be some kind of live streaming video. The video was black and white, and it was of a dark room with some mannequin-looking thing sitting in a wooden chair. There was this grainy effect to the footage that made it feel more surreal and unnerving. I genuinely couldn't tell if I was watching a live video or not. Then, as if it were some kind of movie jump scare, what I thought was a mannequin in that chair suddenly jumped up and sprinted towards the camera, and a loud, staticky screaming sound accompanied it. The apparent porcelain mask that the person was wearing was so close up on the camera at that point that all I could see was black. I went back to the chat and asked that guy what the hell this was. He replied, "Just keep watching, LOL," and then he left the chat. I went back to the other tab, and the video or live stream window was gone. It was now just a blank screen with a text box on the bottom. The text box didn't let me type anything though. My Tor browser window suddenly closed without my doing. Then a deep, raspy voice was coming from my speakers. It was someone obviously trying to disguise their voice. The voice said my first name and claimed they had all my files. Then the webcam window popped up and I saw my face on the screen. I turned off my laptop and went to the Geek Squad at Best Buy where I bought the computer. The guy I spoke to's guess was that he was able to somehow get the basic info off my computer, like my account name. He recommended I factory reset the computer. He helped me with the process. I didn't have anything I was worried about losing on there anyway. It was a relatively new computer. If you're ever on the deep web, I heavily recommend using some kind of VPN, even for the alleged safe websites. I'm 24 years old, and I'm from a small town called Yarmouth in Nova Scotia, Canada. I keep my social circle very small, just my few friends and my coworkers really. I mention that as a point in saying I don't really know anyone who would be out to get me in any way. I browse Reddit a lot in my free time. I'm an active poster. There was this one night when I pulled up Reddit on my browser out of boredom that I had a new message. Not unusual, as I'd have people messaging me in reference to my posts quite often. It was a message request from some random account, a now deleted username. The message said, "Check your email, your spam folder specifically." I replied back, "Huh? Why, who's this?" In the meantime, I opened up my Gmail and went to the spam folder. There was one email that stuck out from the rest, titled in all caps, "I know who you are." I opened the email and it was basically a paragraph full of my personal information, including my full name, my Reddit password, my home address, along with threats. Basically, whoever sent the email was asking for a one-time payment of $5,000 through Bitcoin to a specific Bitcoin wallet address. My heart was basically in my throat. I had that terrible feeling of helplessness and like the entire world was collapsing in on me. The first thing I did was cover my webcam with a piece of tape. Secondly, I went back to Reddit to see if the user ever answered my message. They did not. I went to report the account on Reddit as quick as I could, as if that would even do anything though. I replied to the email, copy-pasting the exact message I sent to the Reddit account, asking who this was, how they got that information, and if this was a prank. I got an email back around 5 minutes later, in all capitals, saying, "No, it's not a prank. We have all your information, including where you live, so your best course of action is to do as we say and you'll never hear from us again." Obviously, I was not going to shell out $5,000. I don't even make a lot of money to begin with. I contacted all of my friends asking if it was any of them, like begging them to just come forward now before I'd call the police. None of them admitted to it, so given that I threatened calling the police, I knew it wasn't any of them. I tried to think of anyone at work who might have issues with me, but really I get along with everyone at work. I chalked it up to my password somehow being stolen by malware or a hacker, and through that they somehow got the rest of my information. The main question was, do I pay the money? and that was absolutely not happening. I forced myself to go to sleep and left my laptop off the whole next day. I used my desktop instead after getting home from work. I didn't sign into Reddit or anything though. I did, however, change my password on all other websites and apps on my phone. I finally signed into my laptop late that night because I was just so bored and curious. Curious but nervous to see if anything had changed and if I'd gotten any new emails. I signed on and everything on my computer still looked normal. So I went to Reddit and saw the user who messaged me was now deleted. So I went to a subreddit which talked about computer hackers and scams and such, and I posted my experience. At some point, I noticed the taskbar at the bottom of the screen turned darker. Curious, I minimized all my windows, and my desktop wallpaper was different. I knew right away what it was though. I recognized the outside of my bedroom window. The white frame of the outside windowsill was in the picture, and the flash of the camera also caught me laying in my bed sleeping. Some seconds later, a pop-up window appeared along with the Windows error sound. Inside the pop-up error window was a message saying the word pay with a winking face following it. I closed my laptop screen and forced the computer off by holding the power button. I also pulled my blinds down and called my parents. It was still early enough to do so. I told my dad over the phone that some hacker had my info, and he came right over with his truck to help me load any valuables I could think of into his truck to stay with them for a while. Before we drove off from my apartment, my dad yelled like a madman into the night sky, basically threatening whoever was hacking me. It was definitely a scene, but I was too preoccupied with worry to be embarrassed by it. I stayed with my parents for weeks and used my mom's computer when needed. I blocked that email address that sent me the original email. I finally got back to my apartment a few days ago. I'm still scared every night to hear a knock at my window or get another threatening email. I haven't brought it to the police yet, as I'm hoping it's all just a bluff still to get me to pay. I'm also hoping it's over and that they've given up. My name is Miranda, I'm 25. I've had my share of experiences with stalkers and men harassing me. Social media has made that far too easy these days. I once got a suspicious email that I should have known better than to open. It was asking me to click a link to some random page because I was being sued by some random company. I clicked the link, and soon after that my computer started acting all glitchy and unresponsive. Even after restarting it multiple times, it was just laggy and slow, and random sound effects would play once in a while. I was certain my computer had a virus, but I wasn't sure to what extent it would go just yet. The next day, I had a bunch of friends texting me what's up with that Instagram post and asking if I was the one who even posted it. I panicked and opened Instagram, but I was logged out of my account. Someone was hacking me, this confirmed it. If they had my Instagram password, I had no idea what else they could have. Apparently the picture posted on my Instagram was some stupid cartoon meme. It was extremely embarrassing. Minutes of freaking out later, my Snapchat started blowing up. It was from some random account that just added me. They were spamming me to Snapchat call them, so I did. When they picked up, I saw like a quarter of someone's face. It looked like a young guy in his 20s. I could tell he was smiling, that was the creepy thing. The way he said hello was so long and stretched out. I was pretty frantic, asking what he wanted in return for my Instagram back. He started telling me some really creepy shit. He said he sees me every day and that he thinks I'm really pretty, and that this was the only way he'd get my attention. I didn't know what to say. He said he'd give me my account back if I would just be his digital girlfriend. As creepy and weird as this was, I said yes in a heartbeat just to get my stuff back. He told me the password to get back onto my Instagram account, and as soon as I changed the password, I set my profile to private and put a story up saying that wasn't me, I was hacked. I asked this guy for his name and what other info he had on me. He said I could just call him John, and that he could get all the information about me that he wanted. He said this with a smile too. I could see it in the fourth of his face that he would actually show. He refused to show the rest. I played nice the whole time, knowing this guy's a sicko. I managed to get him off the call by telling him I'd snap him tomorrow. I then told all my friends about it and asked what I should do. They all unanimously said I should activate 2-factor verification on my Instagram account and then deactivate the account and then block him. When I did all of that though, he didn't take it too well. An hour later, I got a new Snap user blowing up my Snap. I knew it was him, but I opened the snaps anyway, and it was him again threatening me. saying he knows where I live and blocking him was a stupid thing to do. I showed it to my parents now because it was getting serious, so my dad called the police. I didn't block the guy's Snapchat yet though, and I'm glad I didn't. As my parents and I were sitting in the kitchen waiting, I got a snap from the guy. It was a video. I waited a few seconds before opening it. It was a video of him sitting in his car in front of our house with the caption, "Don't block me again." My dad ran outside in a fit of rage. We tried to stop him, but he wouldn't. But the car wasn't even in front of the house anymore. The guy probably waited until driving away before sending that snap. I'm just gonna say the police did absolutely nothing. They seemed clueless on the matter. But there's not much police could do in hacker situations anyway, apparently. However, I did send a snap of the police car back to the guy and put a caption, "Fuck with me again, you'll be arrested." He opened the snap and immediately blocked me, so I'd say it worked. This story has a happier ending than most, I guess. But the amount of info some people can get from you online is absolutely terrifying.